Good afternoon, my name is Dorjee Sun. I'm the CEO of Perlin. We're funded by over 180 strategic and institutional investors, and we're the proud partners of the ICC and hopefully would love to work with the WCF. When you look at this slide, actually there is opportunity in crisis. When you look at the front page of this week's Economist, you see President Trump in the form of a bomb creating all of these troubles through tariffs, through taxes. But guess what? This actually is a huge opportunity. And if you look at the first quote, you realize that the blockchain is the first time in history of mankind that you can actually come to consensus on a piece of data without a centralized control. So if you think about that, looking at the photo of where the American government is taking the world trade, you have to appreciate that actually now we can create transactions, create trust P2P without the need for a centralized government. And so being adaptable is so powerful because when you look at all of these changes in the trade environment, actually technology continues to power ahead. So the speech that we're making today really talks about how technology can overcome some of the challenges that are man-made. If you look at the slide behind me, telephones took 50 years to get to 50 million users. But if you look down the chart, you can actually see that Facebook took only 3 years, WeChat took only 1 year, and Pokemon Go took only 19 days. So despite the challenges that are currently evolving because of different types of regulation, there actually is a huge driving macroeconomic change created by technology. And that's why I'm here. How do chambers of commerce utilize technology? And I'll be talking about 3 specific ways that you can generate revenue, that you can also create more value for your members, but also at the same time create a network of trusted nodes through chambers of commerce. But first I want to paint a picture of what is the future of trade. I want you to picture this. Imagine an autonomous self-driving train taking iron ore from Australia. It comes to a robotic port where bulk ships are loaded with robots, and then that self-driving autonomous ship, which is powered by solar and wind and has AI, and is followed by drones to make sure that no emissions are emitted. And then think about it from a smart contract. So the Incoterms are now programmed into smart contracts, which happen to settle as the ship passes over certain points. Then the actual bill of lading, which is digital, swaps with the letter of credit or even stablecoin. Well, guess what? That future is already here. So headline number 1, Rio Tinto already has self-driving autonomous trains. Number 2, you already have shipping containers done by robots. 3, you already have wind power, different types of sails, different types of solar coming into ships. 4, you now have AI being able to drive the ships. Next, you have drones by Maersk already monitoring emissions. And even Facebook on the 18th of June will be releasing stablecoins as a white paper, as a concept, which could be used to settle these types of payments. So the technology is here. The only thing that hasn't changed is our processes. So for the last 200 years, if you look at the background, shipping hasn't changed that much. But honestly, in 10 years' time, in 2030, do we really think that we're going to be still printing things out in triplicate? I honestly don't believe that is to be the case. But when will be the tipping point is the question. And through the ICC, through the WCF, and through Chambers of Commerce, we believe that it's going to be sooner rather than later. Because look at this, already still 25% of ships, the actual time of departure and the actual time of arrival are still unknown. It goes further, there already are different factions creating blockchains. So for example, Maersk and IBM have trade lanes. On the other hand, Costco and a bunch of top ocean traders have their own. It's called smartcargo.ai. And the funny thing is, they talk about a blockchain war. Well, this is exactly where Chambers of Commerce should be engaged and active, where the WCF and the ICC should be stepping forward, creating standards and creating interoperability. Going further, you already see Cargill and Rio Tinto making trades on blockchain. From 10 days, they've been cut down to 1 day on settlement. They've actually been able to, if you think about the carrying cost of all of the bulk that's shipping, in the case of Rio Tinto, they talked about $600 million per day is the carrying cost of having their ships and tankers not be able to settle. Then you look at JP Morgan, they're rolling out their own stablecoin. Facebook has their stablecoin. even Bitfinex and Tether. This is another huge opportunity. What if chambers of commerce were also able to issue their own tokens, encourage their members to facilitate more trade between each other, and encourage tourists to come? Another example is VACT. So this is 12 of the largest companies in petrochemicals, trading. This is a post-settlement platform. But why am I here? So this is the first of 3 products that we are opening up to all chambers of commerce. All chambers of commerce will be able to become partners, trusted nodes, and our hope is that you're going to actually be able to bring interconnectivity of trade flows between each other. How do we take ourselves out of being the center of the wheel to making you empowered to create your own trade flows from Chamber of Commerce to Chamber of Commerce via your members? And so Clarify is actually the first product where you can trace the supply chain integrity and you can look at the transparency of your members, their different products and goods and services. This is an example. The first was launched at Copenhagen Fashion Summit in May. We had one of the world's largest rayon companies tracing that their fiber is fully certified from seedling all the way through a QR code. You can also even put in SDGs. So if you're prepared to put in the KPIs around ESGs and SDGs into the actual supply chain, you can even trace whether or not, for example, there have been fully certified components all the way through. The second product is called Certified. So once you have the supply chain, you're actually then able to include anti-counterfeiting. So if you think about whether it's an Australian Chamber of Commerce or an Italian Chamber of Commerce or Geneva, think about all of your members that want to protect their brand. Show, clarify that they have the full supply chain that comes from the country of origin as planned, and then have Certify, which actually shows we have different cryptological ways of protection. If you have any interest, if you have anyone within your chamber, if you have any members within your chamber that are interested, these are the top 4, the initial products that we're building. One of them is also certificates of origin. So we are able to put those onto the blockchain and help, again, generate more value for you to provide. But by connecting that to the Clarify, the Certify, and also to the Smart Incoterms, hopefully those 4 products can add value to your members and to you. And then below that, these are some of the experimentations. We're looking at hybrid docs, the interoperability between paper and digital. We're looking at ESG smart loans. So if you have indicators that you wish to include into trade finance, you can actually get reductions in the cost of that finance. You also have zero knowledge, so one of the biggest questions and challenges is how do you maintain privacy? Well, we have a number of zero knowledge proofs which are able to maintain the integrity of the data and the privacy. And finally, we're looking at, is there interest for chambers of commerce for the ICC to have a trade point? So with that note, I encourage you to all relook at your membership and relook at your Chamber of Commerce as actually a node within a global network which you yourselves, the audience here, can create. And this is the future of trade. Thank you very much. So just quickly as well, on that point, I mean, the fact that the WTO has someone as senior as Emmanuel looking at this should speak really loudly. Because when you look at adoption curves, there's a really fascinating saying, which is the future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed. And if you're the first to the future, you're able to sell it to everyone who comes afterwards. So just coming back to this point, the fact that I'm sitting on stage next to the WTO, the fact that governments are now conducting G2G partnerships on trade flows. So specifically, how do we digitalize all of the paper documents for the flow of, say, iron ore from Australia to China? Just think about how you as a Chamber of Commerce can utilize this first mover advantage, because the tipping point will come. And I think we all agree that by 2030, it is very unlikely that we're still going to be printing out in triplicate huge amounts of paper. So you now just need to project, is it going to happen in 2 years? Is it going to happen in 5 years? But generally it happens sooner than you think.
So Dorjee, do you think we need to focus more on self-executing contracts, for instance? Is that the way forward?
So there's a great saying which is that things don't change because your opponents are convinced and suddenly drink your Kool-Aid, and changes because your opponents die. And if you look at your children, if you look at millennials today, do they trust the governments the way that other generations, earlier generations trusted their governments? Absolutely not. You know, do they trust an algorithm more than they trust governments? Yes. Do they trust Bitcoin, or do they trust that if they purchase gold with a certificate that sits in some vault in Switzerland? Right now you can just see from behavior, younger generations are adopting this technology. The efficiency afforded, like the fact that it still takes me 3 days to send money to America is kind of ridiculous, because I can send them Ethereum or Bitcoin and it settles in a minute, 2 minutes. I'm just telling you, this is something which is going to happen. And it's just a question of whether you're going to be an early adopter or a later adopter. To the quote, of course, there are always entrenched interests that want to slow down progress. There's nothing new about that. But in the arc of history, there is right and wrong. And this is definitely going to be a technology which will change the world in certain areas. And I think what we're looking for is that tipping point. So the question just will be, if the chambers of commerce all mobilized, if everyone in this room all mobilized and interconnected and turned each of your chambers into a functional node, distributing this technology to your members, would we hasten that next evolution? Yes. And would it benefit the world? Absolutely. Like just quoting the WTO study, it was approximately $1 trillion, 14% from trade facilitation. And this is one of the best ways of actually creating trade facilitation